The general public doesn't really know a lot about the government's role in cyber. And let me just start with, look, if missiles come over, hopefully we have space-based UFOs that can shoot them down, right? The government's in charge of making sure the missiles don't get here. The government is not responsible for keeping the packets coming into your home router free of attack, whether it's a nation state or your neighbor.
My guest today is renowned expert and entrepreneur Ron Gula. Ron is the co-founder and former CEO of Tenable Network Security, a former NSA expert and currently the president of Gula Tech Adventures. Frequently featured in prominent media outlets such as Bloomberg, Forbes, and the New York Times, Ron is a leading voice in cybersecurity and an investor in more than 100 cyber companies.
But we're always trying to get people to think about, what does victory look like? And, a lot of times people don't do that. They start a business and they're like, I've got a good product, I'm going to sell it, and things are just going to take care of themselves. And I'm like, look, you can reverse engineer malware. You can reverse engineer a 0-day vulnerability, that kind of thing. But you can't tell me what the tax implications of an earnout is for your top employees, that you're not doing things the right way.
Ron's expertise is as broad as it is deep, and our conversation covers a wide range of topics from video games, AI, engineering, entrepreneurship, and the darker side of cyber.
When you start telling people that, look, the news you're reading might be generated for you to manipulate you the instant you're reading it, that's tough. When you tell people your phone is designed to track you and not really to be convenient, we need to kind of change the dialogue so that people will start making more decisions about these things in their personal lives and their businesses.
It was such a privilege to spend time with Ron, and I'm positive you'll find this conversation entertaining and insightful. And now, here's Ron Gula. So I have in front of me Ron Gula, who, many titles. There's lots of things I could use: founder, CEO, investor, philanthropist. I'm sure there's many other titles you hold. I want to turn the question over to you. How do you describe yourself? What's your leading title that you bring in?
That's a really good question. So I never, really kind of introduce myself with titles. Titles are always kind of fun. A lot of people know me as the guy who helped start Tenable. That's one of the big things. Now we're doing Gula Tech Adventures. So you could say I'm an adventurer.
Yeah, so we talked about this just before recording, that Gula Tech Adventures, that adventures part being a purposeful choice because of the activity that I understand of Gula Tech Adventures. You're doing a lot of investment, you're doing a lot of outreach, education, advancement of the cyber workforce, things of that nature. Ventures, I'm sure a lot of people assume that's what is meant there, but you guys went for adventures. Why?
So a couple reasons. One, we're very focused on cyber, and cyber is more than just putting money into a company and doing the next cyber widget that you have to buy from the Gartner Magic Quadrant, right? There's so many other things that are going on in cyber. There's public policy. There's trying to recruit more people to the industry. There's economic development. We have a long way to go in this country, and we wanted to be able to focus on all of that. So Cindy and I, my wife, Cindy Gula, she and I called it Gula Tech Adventures to be very purposeful about doing that. And it kind of gets us the ability to speak to politicians, state level, federal level. We get to go to civil society things, people who do a lot of donations to cyber nonprofits. We've got a lot of work in that area. But actually, we think it's the work as a vendors where we're helping this next generation of technologists come to market, that you need, people say whole nation type work, but you need all this stuff. We need more people, we need more tech, we need better policy. That's why it's adventures. We want to work on all that.
Is there some part of that you don't want to come across as, hey, we're just another like PE sort of thing, another private equity that's just here for money? You guys are more mission oriented, it seems.
Well, when you put money into a company, especially our own money, we do have the advantages of not having our own overhead, right? We're not typically investing and paying somebody else carry, to do the deals that we want to do. It's very personal to us as well. So yes, it's great to invest and make money, but the reality is if you have a great idea to get a technology to protect the DoD, to protect grandma, to protect an airline, getting it out as a capitalist society where people are willing to pay for that and deploy it is the most efficient way to protect the country. So that's where most of our focus is.
I want to talk, definitely I want to explore that topic as we go, the role that capitalism and the motivation to move things along. Like in cybersecurity, we have a big conversation. I'm actually doing a panel on this next week regarding cybersecurity regulation as this stick and the carrot or stick approach to building cybersecurity maturity being something of a nationwide problem. Before we get to that, though, I do want to go to the term adventure here. And I want to talk a bit about your cybersecurity adventure so far. I imagine where you're sitting now, you've achieved so much. I want to go back to like where this starts. Like where
there's so much more to do, right?
Well, yeah, no, and that's the thing. I often find people who have already achieved a lot. It's never about the achievement, and they're never satisfied. Like you're just going to keep going. There's always work to be done, but you could call it quits where you're at and be wildly successful. One of the most successful stories in the industry. Where does that start? Where's your adventure in this world begin?
So I'll get points with my wife, but this is the truth, right? It starts with Cindy, right? So I come home one day and I said, hey, I have an idea for a company. And she's like, I'm going to go figure out how to do all the business stuff. So we've been doing work together now. This is our third company together where husband and wife, happy to represent happy married, couples out there. And it's not for everybody, right? But it works for us. But it definitely started with that. So the first company was Network Security Wizards, where we did network intrusion detection. And this was late 90s, early 2000s. And we kind of did this on our own. We didn't have any venture capital investment. We didn't have any local help from the government. We didn't really have like a repeat founder or anything like that. So we had to kind of figure it all out. So by the time we did that, we've kind of learned from a lot of mistakes. We're also both engineers. And, as engineers, I like to say that we're more interested in being correct than being perceived as being the person with the right answer. You can still be right if you realize somebody else is the correct answer. So that's been a good thing as well. Before that, I was in the Air Force. I really wanted to be a fighter pilot. I actually got to go to, a fighter pilot, training school. Didn't really work out for me. I was blacking out at very, very low G's that are like just above a helicopter or a roller coaster. Type of ride. But I still love aviation, still love all that kind of stuff, and still love the time I served in the Air Force. And a lot of what we do today is still kind of doing that mission type of work.
What in your Air Force time? One of the things that I've read in one of the biographies that I was reading about you was doing honeypot stuff at the Air Force in the late 90s, and that made me think. Sort of laughed to myself, like, man, that's the beginning. Things have progressed so much since that time, but I'm sure that was pretty new territory to be tread. The idea of a honeypot sitting out there to collect intel and deal with adversaries.
Yeah. So just after I got out of the Air Force, which I was serving at NSA, I got to work for BBN, and I was working there with Marty Resch, the guy that did SourceFire and Snort. And we were working together on honeypots. And the basic idea was, you could just take a computer and put it out there and watch it. And a lot of people are doing that. But this was a device that was designed to simulate many other computers, entire networks. And we were selling this to basically a part of the DoD called DISA. And they were putting this at the mega centers for anybody else with gray hair listening to this. And, you could do things like back in that day. You weren't doing full packet capture back then. You weren't doing, a gigabit a second of traffic. It was much slower back then. But we were still seeing scans from all over the world and seeing what these attacks, these adversaries were doing to us.
That early on, they were already, it seems like I also wanted to ask about, starting a tech company in the late 90s. You're talking about having to figure so much out. I was a kid in the late 90s, and I was an early user of the internet. And I love maybe wearing rose-colored glasses. I love thinking back on the early internet, the late 90s, the early aughts, where it felt pretty Wild West. It was kind of its own thing, and it was a lot of fun. It wasn't commercialized. It wasn't this well-trodden, well-established path of like, you start a tech company, you have your Series A, your Series B, your funding rounds, you bring in this talent and cool, you package it up, done. Someone had to tread that path first, and it sounds like you were among them.
So there was two paths that we were treading. So one was this concept of just how do you teach yourself about cybersecurity? And, driving down here, we used to go to the computer literacy bookstore in the mid 90s, and I would literally buy books on SNMP and become an expert on SNMP and buy books on how Ethernet works and things like that. I never bought books on how to start a company or how to brand your company or anything like that. But I was always very good at teaching myself as an engineer about what I needed to know next. And, during that time, the late 90s, early 90s, there was a lot of things that happened, right? Websites like CNN were getting DDoSed. We had the most probably sophisticated attack back in the day was the TCP/IP sequence prediction number, where if I didn't know the password to a telnet server, but I knew where you were, I could almost jam your connection and take over your telnet session and get in. And we would do stuff like that. And that was pretty cool. This was before today, where you have these advanced buffer overflows and botnets that kind of control everything. But what we didn't have was this ecosystem that we have now of like a very, very robust group of angel investors, venture capital investors, state and local county governments who understand the role of helping them take risks and start companies. So the world now is a lot different than it was in the early 90s.
Yeah. Something about like those types of attacks, I almost use the word unsophisticated. I'm sure at the time it's highly sophisticated, but I remember messing around as a kid in like 2004 or whatever, and then telnetting, the first time to a box and being like, this is crazy, like this is wild stuff. And now it's like, you have to be way more advanced in most cases to create an impact in an information system than being able to telnet a box. But I'm sure that was it's like pioneering a new world back then.
And it's interesting because if you end up teaching yourself how cyber works from the tech all the way up to the policy, and then you say, well, how do I then attract new people to this industry? Now that we've done a couple of companies, it's the same thing. You have to learn all these different ways you can grow a company and what does success really, really look like on many, many different playing fields. So now we're kind of trying to do the adventures with Gula Tech, trying to bring both of those knowledges to the cyber startup ecosystem.
Is there a part of you that I'm sure like you knew there were books about business? You knew those were accessible to you, but was there a part of you that made a purposeful decision?
No disrespect. There's books about exercising too, right? There's books about religion. It's you can read a lot, but then doing it, it's a little bit different. You can read music, you can read the history, but doing it and enjoying something is two different things. I really enjoy the startup thing. I really enjoyed cyber, and if you do what you love, you're not really working, which is why I keep doing this kind of stuff.
Was there part of you that in deciding to teach yourself and learn kind of as you went, was part of that a recognition like, hey, I'm not going to give myself biases that other people have. Like, I'm just going to keep an open field. Is that part of why
I think the bias is, look, if you're making money, if you're successful in this business, you're going to make money. And there's a lot of bias of, are you super wealthy? Are you high net worth? What, is it white privilege? There's all these kind of connotations, right? But as soon as you start flipping that around, like, look, I want this for you, right? I want you to be successful. It kind of changes that. So we're very open with our founders, and even people we don't invest with, just give them feedback like, look, the way you're doing this is not going to be good for your family, right? Or the way you're going about this business decision over here is going to limit how well you can deploy internationally. Little things like that. But we're always trying to get people to think about, what does victory look like? And a lot of times people don't do that. They start a business and they're like, I've got a good product, I'm going to sell it, and things are just going to take care of themselves. And I'm like, look, you can reverse engineer malware. You can reverse engineer a 0-day vulnerability, that kind of thing. But you can't tell me what the tax implications of an earnout is for your top employees. That you're not doing things the right way.
I do see that. So I am very early in our startup. We're a services company that does cybersecurity services. We're pretty small, about 25 people. But I've learned a lot just in that time. And one of the things I've had to come to terms with is, I'm a cybersecurity IT guy by trade. I started out on the help desk. Like, I'm just very technical, hands-on keyboard. There was certainly a time where I felt the business of it all was a little below that. Like, I've for whatever reason, I kind of felt negative about the fact that there's an exchange of money, that there's a business to it. I was just like, hey, these systems need securing and I'm the guy to do it. I'm having to learn or I've had to learn, like, that doesn't matter if you can't make this a profitable venture. It's the quality of your work doesn't matter if it can't sustain.
Yeah, so a lot of comments there. So I love this Mid-Atlantic region because we have such a rich group of people who do what I call technical services. And I wish we can mine that group, that once you do this for a while, someday you're going to have an idea, I can productize some of this. And it's just a natural extension of optimizing your business. Things that you don't like to do, you can hire somebody to do those things, like accounting. You're still responsible for them.
Yeah.
It's just like that in cybersecurity, right? You can automate certain things in cyber, but you can even give them to the cloud vendors, right? You're still responsible for those things. So it's all about growth and scale and enjoying what you do. Now, having said that, I get a lot of first-time founders who have no muscle memory for running a business, and they're jumping into a fully, SaaS cybersecurity offering. And I'm like, do your employees have options? Do you have a payroll? How do you do these things, right? How are you going to scale? So I love telling to people, like, look, you don't have to go create CrowdStrike or a Tenable or a Wiz first, right? You should do some entrepreneurial things and try to see what size of business, what's your flavor and what's not your flavor.
Was it always in your mind that your flavor might be something like Tenable to go on and have?
The second time around. So basically, the NSA working for BBN, which is where I went to after that. I got to go work at US Internetworking as well, which was one of the first cloud companies over in Annapolis, Maryland. All different types of startups and entrepreneurship at those things. But while I was at USI, we had some Hungarian hackers, and I was using a product called ISS Real Secure, and their business model was such you couldn't modify the rules. I said, I think I can do something that you can modify your rules. We'll do it on Linux. Never really said, look, at this date, I want to be an entrepreneur. But once you start doing that and you get exposed to how much of an impact you can have on the defense of the country, like the Dragon sensor was deployed by the DoD, by the NSA, by big banks and stuff like that. I was thought I was going to do this for the rest of my life. Start a company, sell it for maybe double digits. I didn't really want to get too big and stuff like that. So when we founded Tenable, we actually founded it with Jack Hufford. Jack was the M&A person from Cabletron, which was in Terrasis Networks. That boss, we became great friends. And I'm like, look, I'd like to try to fix things at our next company versus just detecting the hackers, which we did with Security Wizards. So, but once we started doing that, it was just, let's keep doing this. And it's addicting. It's fun because we're really helping a lot of different people.
Is there ever a time, like before you start all this, maybe in your teenage years or something like that, where you could imagine who you go on to be? Like, was this a vision you had? Like, I'm going to be this type of person. I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I'm going to end up this, successful.
Nope. I never had like the Jack Welch, how to be an entrepreneur books or anything like that.
Did you have a plan?
I was going to go in the Air Force and be a pilot. And the basic plan was I'm an electrical engineer. I'm going to get an advanced degree and hopefully go into astronaut school. Well, when you start blacking out about 4.5 Gs, you don't get to go to be an astronaut or even a test pilot, right? So computers were always my favorite thing to do as a hobby. So a lot of video games, a lot of building stuff, understood that stuff really, really well, focused on that. And, I always tell people, look, you got to pivot your business, pivot your life, pivot your family. I mean, there's big decisions out there. I was in the right place at the right time and didn't fumble.
Do you still play video games at all? You still have time for that?
I do.
Okay.
And I've gotten into two different things. So I do a lot of animation for the YouTube channel. So really high end graphics, Unreal. I use AI to generate characters, scripts, all sorts of cool things. And I also play something called Digital Combat Simulator, where you actually fly an F-16 or F-18 that's accurate.
I've done the A-10 quite a bit.
Yeah, it's accurate to the point that I will talk to real fighter pilots and I will speak the same language, the same knobs, the same, how do you configure the radar, that sort of thing.
Do you have like a full setup?
So I used to do the Oculus, and that's a little tough because like you'd be wearing the Oculus, you're reaching down for your drink or something like that, but you could still look this way and that way over the, but now I've got one of those like 4-foot screens and that's just as good.
Yeah, I've done the A-10, and I remember when I first got into that, I'm thinking like, oh, this would be cool, pretend fly an airplane, but then like I'd like learn the systems. Like you had to learn how to start up. The first 30 minutes of the game would be, I got to go flip this, and I got to go turn the APU on, and all this sort of stuff.
Well, the funny thing is, and it's not funny, it's very serious. When you think about combined joint arms operation, like what NATO would do during a full to gap 1980s type of thing, or what we have to think about what's going on right now in Ukraine with cyber, drones, pagers blowing up in Lebanon and whatnot. Cyber is a massive part of that. So when people start talking about offensive cyber operations, defensive cyber operations, what's the right way to impact? That's something that's very near and dear. So I still keep up with all of those kind of things.
Yeah, you made me think Ukraine. I've seen a couple of videos of like guys wearing essentially Oculus while they're flying drones.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure it helps with like their ability to, sort of put themselves in that space, and they're doing it to great effect.
Yeah, the way, without talking classified, we're not going to go there, right? But when I got to the NSA,
you killed the cameras.
That's right. I said the words, right? But when I was there at the late early 90s, this concept of SIGINT was going away in favor of cyber. And now when you look at, supply chain attacks, close access RF attacks, and how to like track a cell phone, there's a lot of ways to do that. It's almost like we're going back to the signal side of things to impact what you see on the web, and it's amazing the kind of attacks and techniques that are out there that people are not aware of, or even simple things like people think about their laptop getting infected. What about their router on the perimeter of their house? What can you do with that? So it's crazy just what's going on.
Or the amount that just the public networks, the amount of stuff that can be infiltrated, has been infiltrated by the supply chain. There's a lot there. And the impact, I think, hopefully we're becoming more aware of, as a public, of what the capabilities are. Certainly if you're paying attention to the Ukraine war in any meaningful way, like we had on our podcast, Robert Potter, who's Australian, and he's been the last couple of years in Ukraine, told us a lot of interesting stuff about how they're using things like the public telecom, cell networks, to be able to identify when a Russian submarine leaves port, because they would see a sudden drop of traffic to a major Russian social media site from this location based on that. And that starts to put the puzzle pieces together. Okay, you can get a lot out of that domain, not just the flying of drones and the disruption of communications and whatnot, but just pure intelligence gathering in that space. There's so much value there that we need to be aware of.
And this is where I differ a little bit with this administration's approach to cybersecurity, right? So you read the National Cybersecurity Strategy, it's great, right? There's a lot of really good things in there, but the main focus is putting more effort on the government and people like Microsoft and Google to keep us secure. I'm kind of like, look, I want people to be responsible for their own cybersecurity. Most people don't understand how the internet works and they can't make good decisions. So just putting that in the charge of the vendors is tough. So my wife Cindy came up with this concept called data care. We really want to kind of mirror the healthcare industry about how, look, I mean, God forbid you get cancer, you need an expert. You can do it, but you can do a lot of things to mitigate that beforehand. But we have this whole ecosystem of people out there, and without this sort of personal responsibility, people hear stories about the pagers blowing up or tracking the subject of the cell phone tower. Oh, gee, all my privacy's out at the cloud, and people think they can't do anything about it. So I really want to combat that. I mean, look, we've had Colonial Pipeline.
Yeah.
Nobody's really changed. We had CrowdStrike ground every airplane, almost like a 9/11 event. Yep. Nobody seems to care, right? We need to kind of change the dialogue so that people will start making more decisions about these things in their personal lives and their businesses. I
think that's one, I agree. Two, that seems a massive challenge. Just what I see societally, like, even in my own life, it seems to me that the people I deal with either professionally or personally, if they're not in the cyber realm, they don't want to hear about it. Like, it's enough to get them to just accept MFA, right? Like, that's a big challenge to get even business lead CEO types. So I'm like, without this, like you're talking millions of dollars in potential loss, and they finally might get it. A lot of them still need to get hacked first, and then they'll get it.
So the main part of data care is making things personal. And when you start telling people that, look, the news you're reading might be generated for you to manipulate you the instant you're reading it, that's tough. When you tell people your phone is designed to track you and not really to be convenient, you're starting to chip away at those kind of things. A real basic example I like to tell people, and I did a whole video on this. When I was at the NSA, I had these different networks: unclassified, secret, top secret, sensitive. And I knew that every one of those networks was connected to people who had the clearances. And I had this mental image of putting classified data where the classified. So the UFO stuff went here, the space-based lasers went here, right? That kind of stuff, right? We don't have that in civilian land. We have layers and layers of hygiene, and we just kind of tell people do best effort. But we never say things like, look, if you connect a computer to the internet, all the cyber hygiene in the world, we know how to secure it. You're still hackable. Yeah. So where is your brain? Where is your most secret stuff? Where is your jewels, right? And a lot of times people are like, well, that's the stuff with 2-factor, or that's the stuff behind 3. We know how to secure that with a separate enclave. I can do it with Cisco. I can do it with Palo. I can do it with open source stuff, right? Most people don't think about, gee, I can have a private network. Everybody wants the convenience of taking the thing that they're working on and then watching YouTube videos. And we have not done a good job separating that. Even though we've done good jobs of, you need to buy life insurance, right? You need to change your car oil, right? You need to go to a colon checked up, when you get older. We don't have anything like that in cyber because we've missed on that on society.
No, yeah, that's a really good point. And I also, that makes me immediately think of the companies that are bringing product to us as consumers. They're certainly not asking us to become more responsible. They're saying, hey, more and more, they're saying, hey, trust us. We got this. We've got a security story for you. You just buy into our ecosystem. You click this checkbox, upload everything to us. It's all going to be safe. The convenience of that being phenomenal has totally taken any personal responsibility really out of it. There's another part of that I'm finding, which is the time I was raised in, the early internet, I had to be technical. Like I had to build my own computer at times. I had to learn HTML3 because I wanted to, I had to learn a little JavaScript because I wanted my personal website to do something cool and whatnot. Things have become so streamlined. The interfaces have become so streamlined. It's like we had this big jump in, people who got their technical chops that way. And now sort of the younger generations only ever used iPhones and very streamlined experiences. And they're less technical, where you would have assumed by 2024, everyone can code a little bit. Now we're turning toward no code. We're removing that even as, something that people need to do. You're adding in AI. It's how can you create that personal responsibility when it seems like all trending is to further and further remove the individual from that responsibility?
And a lot of stuff to unwrap there.
Sorry, I listened.
No, it's good. It's good stuff.
Got my brain turning.
So if you think about how you went through high school and the stuff you learned in high school for life preparation, what is life insurance? Life insurance is death insurance, right? Health insurance, we have a pool in case person gets really sick. It's kind of a gamble, right?
Yeah.
Banks, why should we give banks money? Well, it's hard for you to invest it, right? And you want some federal government guarantees and things like that. Every one of those things we use in society is sort of a Faustian bargain. I'm going to give up some rights to get something back, and it kind of benefits society. We never had that conversation with how the cloud works, with how email works, with how your phone works. And now we have all these things that are all over the place. I want to be private. Okay, all the devices I have collect everything I do.
Yeah.
Right. Another game I like to play is where's your data? Who can read this email? So if you get an email between point A and point B, who could really read that stuff? Signal, like everybody has Signal. Okay, what are the attacks against that? Oh, it's just secure. Okay, in under what circumstances, right? So a lot of people don't understand how crypto works and how surveillance can work and things like that. One of the things I was not involved, but I had a front row seat for was the Clipper chip. So when I was at the NSA, the government really wanted to push out chips that would guarantee security of communication, but also guarantee government backdoor to those things, right? And everybody freaked out and said, "Oh, we can't have that." And just as a society, we have these really interesting political arguments. Like, of course, you want to decrypt the terrorists and the child molesters' phones, but if I can decrypt them, I can decrypt yours. And we've seen a lot of weaponization of this kind of stuff. So, how do we do it? We have to keep having these conversations. The problem is, right now, the education system is still kind of on its heels post-COVID. Right before COVID, we had Common Core, where we try to focus on the basics. That's great. But we missed an opportunity to get technology into that. And a lot of schools are trying, but it's not a really national effort. So after COVID, or after Common Core, we had COVID. Really hard to get this into the school system right now. A lot of the nonprofits we talk to are trying to do cyber life, data care, type of things for the younger generation. But I feel like we missed 2 or 3 generations out there on teaching them how things really work so they can make better choices.
Yeah, and that seems, I don't want to say insurmountable. That sounds hopeless. It's certainly not hopeless. But what a huge, because this is a societal problem. And the forces working against an effort to try to increase people's sense of responsibility for their own data are some of the largest and most powerful forces that exist in the world at this point. We're going to name companies, not that I'm singling anyone out, but Facebook, Google, they're the type of companies that are taking more away from you in terms of responsibility and saying like, hey, more buy into our ecosystem, more of our product, don't worry about it. Those are huge forces. A force coming in and saying, hey, we need you guys to be more responsible. We need you to put some effort into this. Don't believe them that it's all effortless and you don't have to think about it. You actually do have to do some analysis, which means you have to have the tools to do that analysis. That's a tough, medication to try to dispense.
It is. And just like, dealing with healthcare, cyber care, data care, there's many kind of levers you can kind of pull. Look, email is a public, we're all on email, right? So the idea of having it in the cloud and not doing it on-prem, there's a lot of value in that. Especially if then they're really, really good at defending against email attacks, right? They can see all the attacks and that sort of thing. When they read your email, though, it's a little tough to kind of say, well, is that worth, this kind of thing. Same thing with search, right? So if you search and you realize that your search vendor is giving you results or suppressing other results, okay, they're a commercial company, maybe they can do that. But this has been around for a long time. When I was in basic communications officer training for the Air Force, one of the first things we learned was these old switchboards. So we would call up, hey, I need a funeral home. It's an unfortunate thing, but I need a funeral home. And the operator would only route people to the funeral home that she was friends with, not the other one that was in town, right? So this type of stuff's been going on for a long time. And people just need to be aware of when they are being manipulated and when they're the product versus, when they're the consumer.
The funeral home thing, I read something recently about this. I think it was a big story on Reddit that someone shared. Like one of the early automations introduced to the public telephony system was because someone, like a funeral home competition, one funeral home had it in with an operator. I think they had like a family member. And so someone would make that call, like, sure, let me route you over here. And the competing one invested in, some way to create some automation to remove the operator, which just funny sort of anecdote that I recently read, like, okay, yeah, no, that's probably the driver of a lot of the technological innovation we've seen is things like that.
And at the same time as we're having these conversations about, what the public is really afraid or concerned about, let's look at something like disinformation,
Which is a massive problem.
Massive problem. But basically I would sum up disinformation as like, all right, if my candidate, the other candidate lies or they stretch the truth, that's fine, right? If it comes from Russia or China, though, that's bad. And that's kind of what it means to live in a free society. We have so many rights here in America that we can talk and say anything. It really comes down to, is somebody outside of our system messing with us? That's a bigger problem than how we treat our rappers or how we treat our politicians or how we treat our industrialists that are out there.
That's a big topic because misinformation obviously is a big political topic at the moment. And people are turning toward, Facebook and large media and saying, hey, this is your responsibility to clear up the misinformation. At the same time, you have a pretty sizable public backlash to that, saying like, hey, we don't trust Facebook or Google or whoever to deliver the information. Let it get to us and we'll filter it. That's a big political debate we're having right now, where that responsibility goes.
It is. And for people outside of cyber, I try to tell them, like, look, we don't understand what security is. It's hard to program a computer to figure out what security is. The same way we don't know what disinformation is automatically. We might not be able to recognize pornography, with 100% accuracy. And, look at something like Lumen. They just recently came out. They found a Chinese botnet knocking over routers, right? 5 years. Industry completely missed that until the Lumen folks found it. When I talk to the trust and safety people, like at Facebook and these other places, these people are working their butts off, right? And they are taking stuff down all the time. Typically just hear about the stuff that gets through. Every now and then a vendor is sleeping on the job, and that's fine, right? But they can't be perfect all the time. But the concept that they are responsible for the behavior of what their people are posting, man, that's tough. That's really tough.
Especially the volumes that they're dealing in. Just, to me, it doesn't seem super realistic. There's some obvious stuff. There's unsophisticated stuff that I imagine it's easy enough to detect and use automated systems, but a lot of it's a lot more nefarious, more sophisticated than that. The pure volume is just insane.
And people can suck, right? People suck, right? They post bad things. They can say naughty things. They can lie. They can cheat. They can be non-inclusive, and should a public thing like Facebook enable that? It's tough. It's really, it's a very interesting thing, but we're a free society, right? It's not like China where everybody
has
a
great firewall,
right? We really don't want a ministry of truth, right? We're not going into Harry Potter things, right? It's really interesting, but some of the cool parallels between cyber and the disinformation is you do have these campaigns, right? Almost like malware campaigns of, are you going to push it up via text message, SMS? Are you going to try to get these knowledges seeded in other countries, perhaps like in India, Turkey, and try to get it to come here to the U.S.? Are you going to do it on Reddit? with memes. Like every time I think of a meme, I see a meme right now, I'm like, oh, that's kind of funny. Oh, wow, they're really speaking to me. I'm really wondering, is there an algorithm that's now is somebody kind of getting in my psyche because of those kind of things? I think of stuff like that. I don't know that the general public thinks of stuff like that.
No, well, and like memes is a great one. It can feel kind of unserious to say like memes are a major means of communication, but they are.
They are.
And it's because you don't see them as that, you don't see them as a threat or as having an agenda. A lot of times it's like, oh, that was funny.
And when I say there's people outside of cyber, but there's people who are in marketing, and when they are pushing a brand, a new pair of shoes, right, a new logo, and they look at this through the lenses of their YouTube engagement, their X engagement, their just Google ads, doing that, or what they see on Facebook. Everybody has different experiences with those markets. What people don't realize is these disinformation people are doing the same thing, right? They are going after these sites and trying to flood them with these concepts. And they might not get somewhere on X, but maybe they can get somewhere else on Reddit. Maybe they can get somewhere else on Telegram. Maybe they can do those kind of things. And it's really interesting seeing which groups sort of fall for these schemes and which groups are kind of immune to them.
This makes me think about something I'm reading a lot about lately, especially on Reddit. It's the dead internet theory. Have you heard this, explored this at all?
Well, first of all, the internet. Yes. I think it's an interesting concept. It's
like, are we headed to that where it's just so infiltrated by bots and automation and whatnot that the humans largely end up in echo chambers of?
So there's a couple things like that. So if you're in a group, and the group is you and your peers, that's not the dead internet, right? You're communicating, right? There's a lot of Slack communities that are out there communicating around. But then somebody sees something, an article, and they post it into your group. Well, maybe that article came from the dead internet, right? And it could be as simple as, it was Star Trek Day was recently, last week or 2 weeks ago. Somebody can interject. Usually everybody has like a general channel or a funny comments channel, that kind of thing. So it can seep into these private peer groups. But that's what we have right now. We have all of these trusted peer groups on Facebook, on Slack, on Telegram, on Signal. And what gets into those, I find much more interesting. Because if I just start Googling stuff on CNN or Fox or just, boy, you don't know where you're going to end up. And what sort of those websites are 100% AI generated.
I increasingly see more and more, like it started to invade even the cybersecurity circle. The LinkedIn world and things like that. Like you see people who are in cybersecurity who we're supposed to be the ones that are kind of above all that and understand the threat of it. I see AI content everywhere.
So it's funny. I'm doing a new video, and I have this character called Critical Infrastructure. He's sort of a superhero, and I'm having his alter ego.
It's a good name for a
superhero. I've got a whole bunch of cyber named super heroes, but this guy's working at like the Clark Kent as a reporter at this place. So I made all of these fake newsreels, like they were watching CNN. But I wanted the ticker tape going across the bottom. I had AI generate all that content, and it was right the first time. I was like, "This is cool." Cut and paste.
Yeah. It's AI, man. What a topic that we could spend time on. I'm using it every day in my life. Professionally, personally. Just the convenience of it, the content generation in terms of like giving me an idea. Something that comes up fairly frequently is I'm still in a technical world. I have an automation task. I can write a script in a couple languages or whatever. So I know what the steps are to sit down and do it. Or I can just ask an AI like, hey, give me an outline of this script. I'll fill in the details. Saves me time everywhere. So it's this huge boon to my productivity. It does have, again, there's a nefarious other side to that coin in things like misinformation or adversaries, the capabilities that's going to present to them where I don't know if it's alarmist or if it's just like we need to be acting with due caution here, but the power that it's creating for just a guy like me to do some automation as this compounds and you get nation state resources behind it, I mean, that's a topic of major concern.
So I think the AI is an opportunity to kind of push the data care and kind of teach people again how cybersecurity really, really works. A couple of things I think everybody should do is playing with AI. Is one, they should actually pay for a couple of the accounts, right? So Claude, Bard, whatever they're calling
Gemini
it
now.
Gemini, right? It's hard to keep up with these names, right? But let's just at least go with Claude AI from Anthropic and OpenAI. Ask it the same question and get the two different answers. right? Also, go back and ask a question a couple different times over that and just see how it changes, right? And see what is out there. The second thing is start asking and doing sensitive things. So for example, upload a picture like this. When we first playing with Midjourney, I would take pictures of people and upload it and, put a picture of you hanging out with Donald Trump, right? And that's entertaining, but they stopped doing that, right? So now there's these AI platforms like Flux. There's no limits. And you can even use copyrighted intellectual property like pictures of Kim Kardashian and that kind of stuff. So understanding what those rules are kind of gets people in the mindset of, okay, when am I being consumed here, and when am I the consumer? But what can I get away with, and what's legal? It's crazy what these guys are limiting and what they're allowing.
And who's deciding that?
Well, they are. It's their businesses, and that's the thing. We're a capitalistic society. I'm definitely a fan. Facebook should be able to do whatever they want, and if Elon Musk wants to do something else with it, they can do whatever they want. It's a business, just like the phone company has some regulations, but they can still, their business, they can do whatever we want. So we need to have these conversations of understanding what you're getting with these offerings.
Do you think the spectrum's like the pendulum's a bit too far toward the use of regulatory stick to try to, get Facebook or OpenAI or whoever to uphold some standard?
I'm in favor of regulation when it's needed to, like when the capitalistic forces aren't really there right now. But when I look at something like California banning deep fakes today, I think it's because they don't like Elon Musk. And I just wish they were more straightforward with that kind of stuff versus making more, because a lot of the regulate, even like, you're in CMMC. There's been a couple iterations of CMMC. That's a form of regulation.
Yeah.
And it's generally needed. But boy, is it a taxation? Is it whatever? A lot of times the politicians who are making these laws don't understand the impacts these laws are gonna have. And we almost never get the intended outcome of these kind of things.
Yeah, I'd say, you say most politicians. I don't know. Are there any that we've seen?
The ones that participated in the cyberspace solarium, they were on top of these, but they are a few percentage. I got to interview Congressman Finstad at the oh my God, I'm blanking. It was the Hack the Capitol event, and he's on top of this, and he's a farmer that used tech, right? So you have to have that basis to have the relation. But boy, people who are not in the healthcare industry don't know healthcare just because they're a patient, right? Same thing with cyber.
We talked to, we had Mark Montgomery on the show, and he kind of painted that picture. I was kind of asking him the same question, like, from an outside view, man, you see Congress, they don't talk about cybersecurity. It's not a winning political sort of thing. Yeah. Sometimes it's a political cudgel when it's, hey, TikTok is the thing of the day, but that's different than cybersecurity in the broader conversation needs to be. He, of course, talked about the Cyber Solarium Commission, and I kind of asked him, like, as a taxpayer, is Congress paying attention to this? And he frankly, he was able to name everybody, which he said kind of like, well, if I can name everybody, it's a very small number, right? It's only a few who kind of get it, and even the ones who get it, they're, some of them are on the edge, on the bubble, on the fringe. It's not the mainstream topic that seems to need to be, especially as, it's having a larger impact on society than I think anyone realizes. When now our adversaries can touch our critical infrastructure, they can impact elections, they can do so much. And now you're going to add AI to this equation. I feel like we need a lot more than just a few people with power paying attention.
The general public doesn't really know a lot about the government's role in cyber. And let me just start with, look, if missiles come over, hopefully we have space-based UFOs that can shoot them down, right? The government's in charge of making sure the missiles don't get here, right? We can talk about the border, but look, the government's in charge of our border security, right? Physical security of that, great. The government's in charge of maintaining a military, that kind of stuff. The government is not responsible for keeping the packets coming into your home router free of attack, whether it's a nation state or your neighbor. And not only was it the government, the federal government, it's not your state government, it's not your local county. Even though we grew up with police, firefighters, a local hospital, we don't have a local internet, cyber thing. So first, once people realize that, they then realize that like the government is really doing a best effort. We hope the NSA is going to eavesdrop on all of these nation states who are bugging our ports, right? We hope. I'd like to think they're doing a good job, right? We hope that CISA and DHS is going to inform the rest of the civilian government about new attacks, right? But it's a best effort. There's no guarantee. When you start getting out of the federal government, there's not a lot of consistency,
No.
right? You have things like the New York cyber task force, right? It's literally like they try to get all the different government agencies of New York City to have one place to go for cyber. That's phenomenal. It's not going to scale to perhaps where I'm from, Syracuse, New York. They just don't have those kind of resources. The states of like Texas and New York and California, they've got a lot of resources to do statewide coordination, stuff like that, but it's a little different everywhere you go. Cyber right now, from a policy point of view, is not really being addressed because it's who's in charge. There's nobody in charge of it.
And do we see that changing? Or do we?
I don't see it change. I mean, we've got some more centralization, right? We have an office of the National Cyber Director. I can remember speaking with Chris Inglis. Chris was great. Harry Coker's doing a great job. One of Chris's accomplishments is he met like every CIO in the federal government, and nobody had done that from a coordination point of view. And the public might be like, "Wow, that's an accomplishment." That's like the government's very bureaucratic. Like even Tenable, we had site licenses for civilian governments called continuous diagnostics monitoring. Site license for data. There's still a lot of bureaucracy in these government agencies just to get them aligned to do things like two-factor or deploy EDR and that kind of stuff. And that's just the federal government keeping their house in order. Let's start talking about state governments, right? How many cities have been ransomware? How many, and when people say, oh, we need more help from the federal government, what does that mean? Well, it means money. A lot of times these states, they get grants. And then the question is, well, what are they doing? There's no consistency with these places.
You said something that I want to pull the thread on a little bit, which is like the government's not inspecting the packets that go into your home. There's an interesting question of like, how much of that do we want, if we want it at all? Do you want a higher level of control where, again, like we all want the NSA to be able to crack the phone of the terrorist. Do I want them to be able to do it if it also means they can crack my phone?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it's because we don't define what security is. Okay. I'll pick on an ISP, right? I won't pick on the ISP. I can make an implant with one of our portfolio companies' site. I can mail it to myself on this ISP. Is it the ISP's job to keep custom implants out of my inbox when they are sitting there going, oh, 80% of the mail we carry is ransomware, or is ransomware spam, and we get rid of it. We're doing a great job. It's because we don't define what security is, right? You see commercials during the football. This particular carrier is more secure than the other one. And they say we stop 1 trillion attacks a day, that sort of thing. It's like it's not the ones you stop; it's the one you get through, right? So it's tough. So because of that, we don't have technology. We're not asking as vendors or as consumers of these vendors for what security really is. I would love to have full content inspection of all my traffic. Well, that means somebody needs to be able to decrypt all my traffic, right? Which means they have to look at my email. And I don't know that I want to give that to people who are regularly selling your IP traffic for people in marketing. And so it's almost like as a nation, we're not going to get security because we've given up our privacy. And it's tough. It's really tough. I'm hoping that there are going to be more startups that kind of address this. Like where's the MVNO? That's going to make it harder to do SS7 attacks, harder to do, swap your cell phone numbers just by pretending to be who you are. We don't have that. Instead, we have like Mint and it's more about cost and savings and stuff like. Again, that's good, but because we don't have that kind of stuff, it's tough to then get it.
Is that not maybe a reflection on the public and their demand? I mean, the demand. The market demand all seem to be on lower cost, give me more convenience. There's a small minority of people, I think, who are demanding security and privacy. And it's, we're constantly up against battles to defend our ability to keep our data private or
a couple data points on that. So we've done about 50 cybersecurity investments. The ones that have done the worst are the ones that have to deal with secure phones, secure messaging, anything. Like I could list 100 attacks against Signal, 100 attacks against Slack. Here's a better Signal, here's a better Slack. Nobody wants to buy it, right? They don't want to manage the infrastructure.
Because when I set up Signal, I'm just
and then cool. Apple does a great job of kicking bad guys off their phones, right? They don't get enough credit for that. They also don't get enough shame for the amount of data that's collected off the phone that's then sold to third parties and that sort of thing. Same thing. People, when they do things like let's turn on more security for your phone, app stops working.
Yep.
So after that NSO attack, Apple came out with a couple updates. You can put it in, I forget what it's called, high trust mode or protection mode. But as soon as I started doing that, little things like you can't click on a URL in a text message. Well, is that security? Is that not security? Is that inconvenience? And it's really tough.
The balance that has to be walked. This is something I talk about a lot with the business leaders that we work with. A lot of times they bring us in, CMMC comes up, and I have to tell them like, hey, we can work this. We can get you compliant. We can get you further along your security, but we're gonna make waves. Like there are going to be bumps.
Yeah,
we're gonna break stuff. And they always are like, yep, that's fine. We get it. The first bump, though, they're like, hold on 1 second. You didn't make it fully clear that I was going to be inconvenienced by this. I'm like, well, it's kind of what we're doing. Yeah. Now it's instead of you just getting to click the link gets scanned. It takes a couple seconds. I'm sorry about the inconvenience. I see that kind of push back to minor inconveniences. And it makes me a little skeptical that really we can convince people to come this direction where we need to go, where maybe it's, be a little more skeptical.
So I get to invest in a lot of different companies, meet a lot of different companies, and also talk to services companies. And it's no secret that the Virginia, Maryland, sort of DC area has a lot of offensive companies.
Yeah.
So these are people who break into other companies for lunch, right? This is what they do. It's not in the US, but it's outside, right? So how do they secure their stuff? And what they do is they have an enclave. They literally put on a separate network. It could be cryptographically air gapped. They have a separate chat application, a separate note-taking app, a separate, a video chat, that kind of stuff. And it's like this whole decision that this is the important stuff we're going to put over here. What's on the internet? Hey, we're going to do a lot of cybersecurity on this, a lot of cyber hygiene, a lot of CMMC compliance, a lot of whatever I need to do to do what I do. But the assumption is it's not good enough for my top secret counter UFO, UAP, storage type stuff, right? And that's what people they need to realize, right? As an industry, like I've stood up and said, Tenable, we're going to scan all your stuff. We're going to find all your vulnerabilities. I never said we're not going to find all the 0 days that are coming that we know are in there, and so every kind of cyber vendor gives this, you're good once you're done with us, right? And you're not, right? There's so much more you have to do.
Yeah, we see, I was on a panel recently. We kind of joked about this. We were at a conference where you had vendors who are like, hey, this is our zero trust tool. And you just buy it. And hey, you've done zero trust. And like, that's just not how this works. But everyone is sort of motivated to market that way. And they say like, hey, you only need our product. You get this. Boom, you're secure. Sleep at night. And it's, well, there are layers that need to happen. But even then, the best product in any one space in that Gartner Magic Quadrant, if you go by that, none of them are impervious. And they're all.
Getting back to AI, I do believe there is going to be a trend where, because I want an AI, because I want to tell it my deepest and most darkest secrets, right? I'm not going to let OpenAI have those secrets. Or I'm not going to let Claude. I'm going to do my own and put it on-prem. And as much as, I think I was telling people what people should do before, if you haven't set up your own AI, like get the NVIDIA GPT chat kind of tool, download an LLM, test it out, and see just how expensive it is to run these things. But if you can control your own AI, man, that's the way to go.
Just keep everything off the internet as much as you can.
Well, this is your stuff though, right? So it's like, imagine somebody is going to do, there's so many examples, cancer research, right? Better aviation routes, right? Better algorithms for speed and whatever. Well, how are you going to do that? You have to have this data somewhere. Where you put the data, puts the data in the cloud, right? In Snowflake on an S3 bucket, that sort of thing. I'd like to think it's private. Maybe it's not. Maybe it should be more away from those other people out there, especially now that I've got at least 3 companies in my portfolio right now. Like, look, we're engineering our own solutions because doing it through Amazon, doing it through Azure is too expensive. So we can do a better job running it in our own data center. And you can still get elasticity, availability, all that kind of stuff in private data centers if you kind of know what you're doing and how to scale it. I think that's going to drive a lot of people to put their sensitive stuff in places they can control.
We're doing a circle. It was very much like, hey, virtualization, cloud, make the move. Okay, now we're all over here. And now you definitely do see there's a trend of certain companies. I can't think of who it was. I saw a very big public company they had like a whole write-up about, hey, this is why we decided to go back on-prem. Our costs to operate were just exorbitant.
Oh yeah. And even if you look at these other third-party cloud providers, right? So Oracle, DigitalOcean, that kind of stuff, you can get very similar things from them. Now, again, the ecosystem's on Amazon, the ecosystem's on Azure, but those third or fourth order, they kind of try harder. You get more value. And at the end of the day, you can engineer a lot of really good solutions using multi-cloud solutions. You can do things like sharding, where your data can be stored wherever you want. And if it becomes cheaper to put it over here, just trickle it, and your users don't even know. So there's technologies out there to do that kind of stuff. I think it's going to be very interesting.
The enclave that you brought up a couple of times, we, in our world, in the defense world, enclaves are a huge deal. Mm-hmm. We talk about them a lot. Even in the CMMC space, a lot of times it's like, hey, let's have an enclave for that controlled and classified data, let alone, classified and top secret and whatnot. But you said there's no concept of that really in the commercial space, certainly not, for the consumer. Is that one of the things you see as a potential solution to the challenge?
It's more of this, it's a culture solution.
Okay.
If an organization, whether it's a government organization, private industry, whatever, if they don't have this concept of what's important, it's going to be really hard to secure everything, because then you just got to sprinkle cyber hygiene everywhere and hope for the best. Hope the EDR catches that latest attack right there. But if you truly do say, this is the stuff that I want separate, and it could be as simple as like, look, corporate decisions. We do executive leadership team every Monday, all of our notes, all that kind of stuff. I want that separate. Now, if you're a law firm and you're thinking, oh, every one of my clients is separate. Yeah, it's true. But the decision about taking clients on and passing those clients, maybe that's a business decision and you want that separate. So in other words, you ever hear like what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas? Well, what happens if it's connected to the internet, if you're getting content from the internet, you're probably going to get infected from the internet at some point. So these enclaves can be a lot of different things. I'm not suggesting people need a SCIF, right, where it's electronically segmented from the world and stuff like that. But the idea of having computers that can't talk to anybody else except the computers they're supposed to talk to. Now, can I use my home Wi-Fi? Yes, you can. Now, the SCIF people out there be like, well, I can intercept this and stuff like that.
Sure.
True. But if I have, let's say I have a company of 500 people, I've got maybe 20 people that are on my executive team. They have a separate set of computers, a true reason to carry a second phone, right? A true reason, not a phone that's got a VPN on it that can get into my office that I can still go to Facebook on, right? A phone that can only talk to other phones that I've issued and that sort of thing. Once you have something like that, this is the ELT network, right? This is the executive network, right?
Yeah.
Then it becomes a little bit easier to think about, all right, well, what's good? Now, of course, you can't put everything on that network and then connect that internet to the internet, right? Because that's not, so you got to have this demarcation somewhere. And this is where a lot of people have a tough time for doing. I want to give people a reason to carry a second phone or have a separate laptop that does something that's really, really valuable to them.
So I'm a cybersecurity professional, and I have in my home, I have my own, I've architected a home network. I've got a server and some other stuff. As I've gotten busy in my professional life and have a family and whatnot, even I've started to be like, you know what? Maintaining this has become so inconvenient that I'm using a lot of cloud services and things where I'm even still skeptical of certain Google products. But listen, I back up my photos to Google products because it's a button I clicked. I wonder if we're going to be able to get traction for people to use something like an enclave model for their most secure stuff without having to become decently skilled, as technicians.
But I think what they don't do when they're thinking about this attack is like, what are they worried about? Like, what are they worried about? I'm worried about two things. One, we have money. I want to make sure if I'm investing money or putting some money somewhere, it's not going to the wrong place. I don't want somebody to spoof me. I don't want somebody to do a wire. I don't want somebody to do anything like that, right? So that's one set of attacks. Frankly, if I've got documents for a company, I've lost documents for a company, right? I've actually had a cyber incident, right? This happens, right? It's not the end of the world, right? You have to respond to it accordingly and that sort of thing. But what would be the most embarrassing thing for Gula Tech Adventures? It would be our internal sort of conversations about, gee, we really don't. This great tech, don't like the CEO. We can give that feedback to that shouldn't be feedback to the world. So that kind of stuff is what I would not want to, and most other venture capital firms and family, they don't want that either. They really want that separate. Now, if I'm a law office, I'm a dental office, I've got compliance and regulations I'm supposed to, that stuff you can secure with enclaves, but at the same time, you can put business processes, you can do like the 3 lines of defense like we have in the financial industry and whatnot. So the point is that people need to make these decisions of what is secure and what they're going to do about it versus just trusting that this set of vendors, which are going to do their best effort, is doing a best effort.
I definitely see that. I see there's an assumption a lot of times when I talk to a business leader, there's an assumption that everything's secure because, well, we bought the business version or whatever. I'm like, well, you're still sending an email. You don't have control over the server that it connects to and how it gets answered over there. So we have a technology to encrypt your email if you're really concerned about those conversations and whatnot. And they're still kind of hesitant and skeptical. And they're, well, hold on, why do I need to do that? I thought this was all secure. And you start telling them, well, no, I mean, if someone got your username, your password, got through your MFA or whatever, like your whole history of everything you've ever emailed anybody, it's kind of there.
It
and
is.
in that moment, they're like, okay, hold on. So maybe I should be hitting this encrypt button. Yeah, you probably should.
And this goes back to what we're teaching the general public, what we're teaching the younger generation. How does encryption work? Who can read your email? Who's got control to decrypt those kind of things, right? So how do you evaluate something like a, oh my gosh, what's the email service from Switzerland that people use? That's all encrypted and they don't
Proton?
Proton,
Yeah.
Thank you. How do you evaluate something like that? It's really interesting. And then at the same time, when you look at a CrowdStrike, when you look at a Tenable, when you look at any vendor out there that's doing their best to keep the Russian hackers out of your network, what do they have?
Yeah.
How does this document? Actually, that was my security issue, by the way. I had somebody who was inspecting documents looking for malware. They submitted the document to VirusTotal. So now I have a sensitive document on VirusTotal, right? And and it's like one flip of an API. You're submitting a hash versus the actual document. This happens quite a bit in our industry, and it's there.
It's something like the rise of personal VPNs. I've seen a lot of personal VPN usage in our SOC detects it all the time when people are trying to connect to their work email and whatnot from private VPN. We have to remind people, like, hey, they tell you they're secure, that they don't track your data, that they won't do that. They're just telling you that. Like, you don't know that. And so you see that usage, but it's the same problem. Unless you pull the thread and have the tools to ask the right questions, I mean, you can sniff out pretty easily which ones are legit and which aren't.
Absolutely. And it gets back to the whole thing of we pitch people, we use my VPN and you'll be secure. Use my malware and detector, you'll be secure. Use my 2-factor, you'll be secure. Well, you'll be more secure.
Against certain things.
Yeah, certainly 2-factor is more secure, but we never tell people that, by the way, if the place you're going with 2-factor authentication has crappy cybersecurity, that was a bad decision to go there in the first place. So good job that you hit a password, but guess what? The bad guys hacked him and they still have all your data.
Right. Thanks for using the VPN. Protects you against certain attacks. But by the way, now we see everything that comes through here. So if we wanted to target you, hey, we got it all. Yeah, it's a field of landmines, and I think the data care concept, getting people to be more aware and to take more personal action, I think certainly needed. I think the forces against that are significant, though. I think if it's a mission that you guys clearly are running with, like, you clearly have your work cut out for you.
Well, there's a lot of things we have planned. One of them is basically just trying to do more investments that hit a larger number of people, and where you can bring a message like that. Like, how can you be personal, be responsible for your own data, your life documents, that sort of thing. So trying to do more. That's kind of the future of what we want to do. We want to do more things that protect the nation, more things that protect large numbers of individuals. And a lot of this is experience from we've had with, for example, like Huntress. Huntress is a great company, right? The team there is just killing it. But if you go back to like, back when they were, just starting out, nobody wanted to invest in a company that was doing basically EDR for small business, right? There's no market there. Now they're doing, it's doing great. That's the kind of stuff we want to do. We want to bring tech that's automated, that scales to a large number of people who don't have it.
So that's clearly part of the investment strategy at Gula Tech. It's not, you guys aren't just looking for what's the next hot product, let's invest in that. There's a mission behind that. It's, there are principles you guys seem to want to advance.
Absolutely.
So now that you've you have Gula Tech Adventures. That comes in large part out of, I'm sure, Tenable. Your time at Tenable, the exit from Tenable. Clearly an adventure just to make that happen. As we were preparing for the podcast, I did some reading. You were there from 2002 to, what was it, 14, 18?
14, 15, kind of runs together.
So you
now.
go from founding to opening up an IPO valued at $3 billion.
Yep.
That's congrats, first of all. That's amazing. That's incredible. I have to imagine you learned a lot along the way.
Yep.
I'd love to hear a bit about what you learned, maybe particularly for an entrepreneur who's very early in their stage, certainly not eyeballing a $3 billion IPO, but certainly would like to exit in a more successful company than I started it. Sort of things you learn along the way that you think would benefit.
Yeah, so a couple things. I got a whole bunch of stuff to share. So first of all, like when I left, a lot of the work that I did 16 years, did it with a lot of great people, right? Renaud Darrison, the original author of Nessus. He was a CTO at Tenable. My wife, Cindy, Jack Hufford, Steve Vince, CFO, a lot of great people, right? So it wasn't the Ron Gula show. We had a great number of people there. But then when I left, Amit Yaran took over, and he's doing a great job since he's been CEO. When I did Dragon back in the day, Amit ran RipTech. So we've known each other for a long time, and his career doing NetWitness and RSA, I really thought it was good that he was able to kind of be in the position of Tenable, which is really being more proactive. Now the market, if you compare like Tenable to CrowdStrike, the market's rewarding incident response, right? People don't want to fix their stuff. It's easier just to respond. But Tenable is still like the leading company when it comes to like getting your stuff
100%.
going, right? And that lesson right there, it influences my investment stuff, right? So when I see things that fix things and automate things, I want to make that investment because I want people to use automation to fix things. But at the same time, some of the sexier, hey, let's just prevent the attacks. We have an investment in Trinity Cyber. They can take the attack on the wire and just remove it, not block it, just gone. Here's a 0-day, here's a document with a CVE vulnerability, blah, 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 exploit. The document shows up, it's just gone, right? So that kind of stuff is really neat. A couple other things I learned just going through that journey is all that money we raised was first two before the IPO was all secondary. And this is kind of an odd thing to probably talk about on a podcast about cyber and stuff, but secondary sales is a tool you can use when you're being super successful and you still want to raise money. The money that goes into the company doesn't actually go into the company. It goes into the employees of that company, usually concentrated based on the founders and that sort of thing. So a lot of times in the life journey of a startup, you do the startup, you get some traction, you grow your sales team, and you get an exit. You can have somebody invest in your company and buy out people, and it really is a tool that people don't use enough. I've invested as a secondary investor a couple times in our portfolio at Gula Tech, and it's just something that you don't really see people leading with, especially now that we've had a lot of companies go through COVID and then go through the financial kind of crises of 22 and 23. Got a lot of companies who are cash flow positive but growing 10, 15%. They're not growing 200, 300% a year like you need to do to have the growth and scale of a Tenable, a Wiz, that sort of thing. But then the last sort of big Tenable thing that I learned, and I learned this from somebody who was our advisor's board chair, Michael Capellas. He basically said you've got to communicate to everybody the same way. Your investors, your employees, your competitors, the media. If you're not saying the same thing to everybody, you're sugarcoating it a little bit, people are going to dilute your message. And you really when I would do stuff, I mean, of course, I might say more technical things in a sales presentation about but the message of what Tenable was there for wouldn't change. Trying to be consistent and telling most of my portfolio companies that story is a really hard thing for people to do, because a lot of times when you have a founder who's very passionate about his or her company, they confuse the fact that is the company them or are they the company? The company is a separate entity. Yeah. And as soon as people start thinking about it that way, it's a lot easier to communicate consistently.
Yeah, I personally, I can see that. I mean, there was a time for my company, it was a company of one. Became a company of 2, 3, but still so deeply involved. And at 25 people, I'm still very much in the day-to-day. And the traditional wisdom I constantly read and hear from talking to peers and whatnot is like, you got to get out of the weeds and whatnot. Now, I'm a technical guy by trade. My answer for problem solving is let me get hands on keyboard and we have problems that come up, fires that need fighting, and I can't like remove myself from it. You're a technical guy too. You're an engineer by trade. Was there a point in either that company or previously where you had to make the purposeful decision, like, hey, I'm here to run it and build it now. I'm not the person to engineer the solution anymore?
So when you're a smaller company and you've heard the thing that 10% of the people do 90% of the work and that kind of stuff. It's an easy thing to say. Look, you can't scale a company with that, right? You have to do more. But the first company we sold, Network Security Wizards, I think there were 7 people. So when we first started Tenable, I can remember having an all hands meeting of 20 people, and Marcus Rainin, the inventor of the firewall, was working at Tenable. He's running our training, and he kind of pulled me aside. He says, everything's kind of flowing through you. And that always stuck with me, that we always talk about you need to empower people and but it was after that I was like, okay, I'm never going to scale this unless we can really start, giving people the tools to do what they need to do. I still kept some things that I liked. So there was I never was writing vulnerability scripts for Nessus or anything, but we had this log tool, and I would write correlation rules. Look, because I was always very interested in that kind of stuff. Great. Keep something that makes you happy and stuff that's okay, but tell people like, hey, I'm going to still do these things. When Tenable was doing dashboards, we had the security center. We had these things called assurance report cards. I was very involved with that kind of stuff, right? So I tell every one of my founders, like, look, you can't do everything, but you should just keep some of the things that you really enjoy and let everybody know that you want to be involved with these things.
All right. So I can feel a little guilt-free. I literally this past weekend, I spent a bunch of time writing, PowerShell script just to like solve something. I was like, this is bothering me. And, one of the things I've continued to hear, we're going through scaling, and it's challenging. I'm finding like, okay, there is a lot that flows through me as an individual. I need to let some of that stuff sort of go. And so you hear all this wisdom of delegate, empower people, maybe don't be the guy to write the script. But then I'm like, but I like that sometimes. I like to sometimes solving a small tactical problem is a win.
It's hard to be consistent with your message when you have to know your audience, right? So if you have a super technical audience, it's really easy to kind of focus on the technology, but you got to do the same thing with the media, right? The media might be trying to get you to go to a certain place. You got to focus on your message, right? That's the hard thing to do, but we did that really well at Tenable. And I kind of tell all my companies, you got to really talk to your employees, your competitors, the media, this all the same way. And I see this at Gula Tech a lot. Like I'll see a pitch deck and I'll go to the website and I'll see different verbiage message on the website than there, or how they answer questions is yet. Now, again, when you're small, you're evolving. I get that. So one of my things is, okay, hey guys, that's not consistent. How quickly can they fix it? I had a company, what they were pitching us was different that was on their website, and they took them like 45 days to do it because they were delegating. They didn't have the right marketing people. The CEO didn't want to just go in there and fix it. But there's a time to know when you should just, fix it and that sort of thing. Along those lines, the way we kind of synthesize this, we have something called the 5-slide pitch deck. When somebody pitches us, we want them to say what problem they solve, how they solve it, have some sort of proof, right? Have their ask, and then have some vision of success. And, the ask and the vision of success is usually beyond most people. Like nobody ever says, I want to raise $3 million. And in 2027, January 12th, we're going to be acquired by Cisco, and your $3 million investment after taxes is going to be worth, $65.2 million. Nobody has that, right? And I'm not expecting that, but how much, what if you started a company, did you start to get rich and be an entrepreneur, live an entrepreneur lifestyle? Okay, that's fine, but it's kind of hard to work with that, right? But if you started a company to solve a problem, how do you measure the problem being solved? And that's what we really want to see in, this 5-slide pitch deck where people says, we want to be in every home in America. Well, great. There's 300 million homes. How are you going to get there? You can calculate what the company's worth if you can do that. But the financial result is a byproduct of being successful and going after that success. We want to see all that.
Do you get a lot of open-ended asks where it's just like, hey, we're solving this problem, we need money?
Yeah, we get that quite a bit. And a lot of times it's in things that you can imagine. So right now, quantum resistant
Sure.
VPNs, right, or quantum resistant encryption, right? I want to be able to communicate and do some quantum, whatever. What am I looking for here? Better encryption, so that if somebody with a quantum computer can't decrypt it, right?
Yeah.
Fine. Nobody seems to care about that, right? The NSA seems to care about it. I think we got a couple of years before we have to implement something like that. I know that there's botnets taking down lots of traffic, which is interesting. It's going to be interesting to see if we can decrypt that kind of stuff. But that's a good example. AI for SOCs is another one. I've probably seen about 50 companies who are going to take your SOAR, your SIM, put some AI on top of it, and do really good things like reduce the workload of the SOC, reduce increase the accuracy of what's going to happen, right? But I've literally seen pitch decks. We do these things. We've got a $5 million raise. Let's know if you want to talk. And that's not interesting.
So when you do make an investment, what criteria are you looking for? What's a Gula Tech investment look like?
So it's changed over the years. Just being honest, coming out of Tenable, we had made some money. We had done some small investments, $50K, $100K. We had some bad experiences. We had some amazing experiences. And that was sort of our attitude going into this. We thought we were going to do more of if you're in this region, like a Mach 37. We actually spent time with Rick Gordon. How can we expand what the good work he was doing? And then we kind of did it a little bit different. Let's do some seed investments, so smaller checks. But now, after doing this for 5 years, we're writing, some of our first checks are like $1 million, possibly even more, maybe like $500,000, that sort of thing. And we want to see a couple things. One, we're acknowledging we're going to have to work with these people for a period of time. Like we put them on the website, we talk to them, who Gula Tech's going to be on their board, going to work with them on a daily basis. So we want to make sure the team is workable. And then the second thing is, well, is this a problem that we really care? Because we've met a lot of great teams working on problems that are not interesting to us, right? So the second, can we work that problem? Like, where is this going to go if it doesn't work out, right? Where is this going to go if we have to pivot? That sort of thing. So we're basically investing in stuff that protects the country, either at scale or in a niche kind of thing, and it's going to be a decent investment, and the team is going to benefit from working with us.
What do you look for in the leadership of those companies? Like, do you have some sort of pulse you feel that you're like, this is going to be a good one or versus a bad one?
It's a lot of different things, because you have great leaders who aren't great technologists, and you have technologists who aren't great leaders. You've got maybe the team, maybe it's a husband, son, or husband-wife thing. Maybe it's a father-son thing. So you have these dynamics. The question is how is that team going to change? One of the biggest things we struggle with is when you have a founder and they're co-founders, whether it's a husband-wife team like me and Cindy, or it's two brothers, three people who went to college together, right? They, to get to at some point where they deem success, they then feel that this is my team. So the question is okay, does that success, maybe they get to $1 million in revenue, to get to 10 million, can they let somebody in the tent? And there's an expression we have in venture, we call it the self-limiting CEO. And a lot of people that's a negative connotation, but you can self-limit it to $100 million in revenue. That's pretty good, right?
Yeah,
but that CEO is not going to get you to $1 billion in revenue. Granted, there's other CEOs, probably $1 billion, who aren't good at the startup thing, right? So at what point is that team going to be self-limiting? And then what can you do to help them? Do you want to introduce them to more advisors, right? Do you want to meet other CEOs? Do you want to say, look, wouldn't it be easier if you did these kind of things? Real touchy. I'm very founder-centric, very founder-focused. But sometimes, look, I've had a lot of conversations with it, like, look, you're getting it done. You're not growing as fast as you can. There's nothing wrong doing the way you're doing. You're a successful business, which is why I go back to that 5-slide pitch deck. What is your vision of success? How do you want to get there?
CEOs, that's the title I use now at my company. And I often describe it as it feels lofty. We're 25 people. It feels like a CEO is a title for something bigger. But I started using it when I built more of an executive team around me. And now I'm directing more in that sort of way. And so I was like, all right, it's time to use the title. Still feels larger than it is. But I've started to turn toward learning more about what it means to be a CEO, from a founder, from a firefighter, problem solver, hands-on keyboard. I'm finding it challenging. I'm finding that it's definitely a skill I'm having to learn. And that means reading, that means talking to people. Someone who's done that. I mean, you talk about an all staff of 20 people when you're at Tenable to a $3 billion IPO. We just had an all staff, about 20 people. Again, $3 billion IPO, probably not in the cards for me for this company, but surely we can go on to be pretty successful. What makes the CEO that you were, from that 20 person to that 3 billion, like what was that gap and how did you cross that? What made you good to get Tenable to where it was?
Yeah, so we had a great team. So between Jack and Renaud and Cindy and the folks who worked for us, we were able to enable, a lot of that growth. But the second thing is we never sat back and just did what we did, right? We always invested in what was new. And if you look at those 16 years I was at Tenable, a lot happened during that, right? We had more mobility, right? Laptops had Wi-Fi, right? Phones were now scannable, right? We had virtualization, we had VMware, right? We had people wanted to audit the full attack surface, right? So routers and switches. We had some of the first initial audits for like Salesforce and cloud applications and stuff like that. So that all happened on our watch, and customers, and we never said we're going to charge you more for it, right? We're never going to be like, hey, there's a new vulnerability. You got to pay up for this, right? Now we did play around with the licensing model because we had open source, and it was really hard to build Tenable on an open source technology. And we did make a decision to close source it, and that's really well documented.
I appreciated the open source at the time. I remember using it early on.
It was still open source after it. Not today. There's so much open source behind people's commercial SaaS things. It's a really different world than what it was before. But when we started Tenable, we were literally doing, $50,000 deals, $75,000 deals, where we had to indemnify the customer of ours in case they got sued using the open source that we were in charge of. Which is it was just crazy, right? Yeah. So we were very incentivized to like, let's make this a commercial offering. But we did a lot with free feeds and stuff like that. But again, it's a different world today than it was in 2010, 2005 and whatnot.
So you guys didn't rest on, on your laurels there and say like, hey, we built a good product here. You were always paying attention to what was coming down the pipe.
Always. And we tried a lot of things that we didn't, that worked, but didn't really have as much impact as we thought. One of the things we tried was, if I described to you how CrowdStrike works, you get these agents, you have stuff going to the cloud and whatnot, and I described to you how maybe patching worked, where you have these agents and stuff going to the cloud, and I described to you how Tenable worked, right? Similar architecture. So I was like, maybe we can do malware detection, because I would think a vulnerable piece of malware or a vulnerable piece of software is risky, but so software that's designed to be malicious, like malware. So why can't we detect that? So we added some stuff. We had a great partnership with Reversing Labs and some of the other threat folks that are out there. That was interesting. People liked it, but since we're not full on malware stuff, it was a little distracting to the vuln management business. We also did a lot with log analysis, and I wanted to do it from the point of view of, if I can take logs and I can learn that you've got a log, maybe this laptop's got PeopleSoft on it, and I can get a PeopleSoft log out of your laptop. I now know that PeopleSoft's running on that laptop, and that's a different type of audit than that. And then we also made a big thing with passive detection, where we can sit outside a network, almost like that network intrusion detection system. And so we all did these kind of innovations. We even had like a 3D visualization tool.
Oh yeah.
So my point of telling you all that is, it was good. A lot of customers got value out of it, but we're known for scanning and vulnerability and compliance.
Sort of the gold standard.
It is. But you have to do and constantly innovate and do stuff like that in order to keep growing and keep the customer's attention and just be the Willy Wonka. Like, come up with stuff that people haven't even asked for yet. Because if you don't, you're going to be BlackBerry.
But that means being willing to face those.
And it's okay to be wrong. It says, fail fast. It's like, look, you got to know when to kill a product, right? Know when to rename it. Know when this is a feature that you should just be giving away with your business and not as a separate charge. And that's a very subtle thing to do as a CEO, is make those kind of decisions.
You clearly you married a really strong teammate, but you also, as you mentioned first and foremost, you led with a lot of that success came from the team. As you assembled a team around you to go on and turn this into a $3 billion IPO, What did you find, necessary or useful in building that team? What were you looking for?
So again, Jack was the finance side of things and really good. Cindy, they did all the operations, all that sales ops stuff like that. But getting in a CFO, Steve Vince, who, first time he sat me down, talked about what financial FP&A stuff looks like, and things like if you guys have been to Merriweather, you can see the Tenable building, right? So just given that type of horizon, starting to add people like that to the team. We had similar investments. I say investments, hires, in engineering, in research, and it just gives you the ability to dance faster, predict better, have more confidence about going longer. We had a great European team, for example. That really enabled us to think longer. And one of the factors of me moving on was like, look, I got this 5-year, 6-year view of what's going to happen. That's when you get to that's like the speed things go, right? It's not, if you're worried about like the next formula that's coming out at that scale, you can't do it. So you have to learn to let go and enable these people and trust that they're the best at what they can do.
Did you personally find that hard? Was it harder for you to let go?
Yeah, of course, right? But at the same time, you still keep a few things. Yeah. Like I always had an open door policy. I had folks from IT come talk to me, dev team come talk to me, and there's things I enjoy. And like, look, if somebody's implementing, I can still remember Renault would show me some of the new checks that we were doing. I'd get to test them out first, and I QA'd a lot of our own stuff. So that's a way to keep involved. And some of my CEOs in the portfolio who are not as technical, they have to rely on somebody to QA, somebody to document, somebody. They don't have that enjoyment of getting. Now, there's very few in our portfolio because most people who do cyber tech startups are somewhat technical and have a vision for what the problem they're trying to solve. But that is definitely something you have to understand what you're doing to keep in touch with the people and what you're doing to keep in touch with the tech.
You mentioned something too about some of the investments that you're trying to make. There's like cybersecurity, if it has a sex appeal, it's all in like the red team. It's a lot in the incident response. It's the CrowdStrike type of stuff. But you're very interested in making investments, as you mentioned, like in the preventative side, like solve a problem, not just react and respond to it. If I could take us to an even less sexy topic in cybersecurity, one that's hot in my world, I service defense contractors and we have CMMC. So we have regulation as a driving force for ideally cybersecurity maturity. I think it's not been successful to date, but the new version of it seems like it's poised to make something happen. I want to talk to you about compliance. That's a topic, and that sort of stick of regulation as a meaningful way to increase cybersecurity maturity and resiliency. Do you see this panning out? Do you see this as the best tool in our toolbox to do that?
So it's very interesting because we've had a lot of compliance over the years, right? I can still remember getting briefed on the payment card industry, PCI, the first time, and I was like, wow, we're going to have to do this as Tenable. And the whole regulation for PCI was you had to do it as a service provider. And we were very committed to be a vendor and let other people do it. So we were left out of this, like literally we were kind of stalled for like a year or two, just trying to figure out how to do that kind of thing. It's this really difficult problem because on one hand, we want to tell people how to be secure. And then we want to measure them on how to be secure. And these things have a cost and people really they don't understand the benefit they get from these things because we're not approaching this from like an IT management, right. point of view. So look, with CMMC, the DoD is rightly so. They're worried about China and Russia hacking into these small places and stealing stuff, influencing things, the supply chains. I get it. So what do? Right? They say you got to be CMMC, compliant. If you're going to do business with the DoD, they have absolutely every right to do that. I have a lot of friends who are involved with the CMMC foundings and stuff like that. But then there was a lot of pushback from the big guys. There was pushback from the little guys saying this is a cost, this is a burden. And I'm pretty much here to say that guess what? Small business doesn't do cybersecurity very well, right? It's a burden to them. Just trying to have a conversation about turning a two-factor on for a restaurant, for example, right? Now, is a restaurant a supplier to the DoD? Sure, in some cases, right? It's if they're giving food on
there's
basis, catering
sure.
and stuff like that. You want to put two-factor on that? It's sort of like we're pushing the wrong things. there's nothing, I don't have like these lofty, like some people criticize the NIST cybersecurity framework as it's too much one thing to fit everybody, whatever. It's just, look, the reality is small business needs more money and more guidance. They need more people like you to help them go through it. Nobody really wants to do it if they don't understand it. But once they understand the threat, yeah, they're going to have to spend money. I've seen some really horrible companies doing business with the DoD.
Oh yeah.
And just anybody who's in a threat business, if you see all these threat fees, if you have the ability to query the IP address or DNS name, figure out what businesses go, you'd be surprised how often major companies and small businesses that do business, they're owned every day. So we got to do something better. I'm in support of CMMC, but I don't know how we pay for it. We need more technology that's cheaper, that's easier to get this stuff compliant, that people can then be secure.
We talk about a lot in the CMMC sphere, especially in the small business side. I mean, I work with small businesses all the time. I regularly take phone calls, that first phone call that they make to say like, hey, we're learning about CMMC. We need to know, what do we need to do? What's it going to cost me? And I have to do the whole thing of like, well, it's not a one-time thing. It's basically build a cybersecurity program. And here's kind of what, roughly going to cost. And it's always, 9 times out of 10, shocking. And they're like, oh, we can't afford that.
It's interesting. We get pitched a lot of different things. This will be relevant to the compliance discussion in a second. But one of the areas we invest in is incident response. And, one of the things we've learned from that is that there's a business model of trying to engage people right after the attack. So I've just helped you recover from a ransomware, and now I'm going to help you have secure email, right? Or secure your network. Or, again, we don't define what security is, but something better than before. Almost every company that's in that business doesn't have that business anymore, because it's more profitable just to focus on incident response, do your work and leave. Because
I would have assumed
it's there's a sort of a view that says, Target was more secure after they were attacked. These companies, Colonial Pipeline, is more secure after these attacks. Okay. I don't see that in practice though. If it's not a headline, people go right back to doing the way they were, because they don't have the culture of doing that.
Who should carry that burden? You talk about the burden that something like CMMC creates. Small businesses, a lot of them can't afford it. A lot of the pushback or things I hear is like, hey, they're locked in a contract. They agreed to provide something at a price. Now, unfortunately for them, a lot of them agreed to provide on a contract that required them to do the cybersecurity stuff, and they haven't done it. But the reality is almost nobody in the defense industry did what they were supposed to.
Yeah, and this is where I think the government, state, local, economic development, federal can do a lot more, right? We had grants for COVID. Right now, is cybersecurity on the scale of COVID? I don't know about that. But at the same time, I'll give you a good example. So we're recording this in Virginia. I'm from Maryland. There's counties in Maryland that will pay for your employees to get cybersecurity certified, especially if you're doing work with the government, because they understand that they want to keep businesses like yours in Virginia. So why not give a tax incentive to do this kind of training? Now, that makes a lot of sense on the tactical scale of a small business that does cybersecurity auditing. Well, what's the equivalent to keeping your small business secure? If you can do loans, if you can do grants to get a more diverse workforce, maybe you can tie, hey, look, I'm going to basically allow you to hire from people who don't look like me, right? So women, African Americans, just why not tie that to like a works program and do it? And again, this won't scale across the country. I've seen different things like this work, at different places. So the idea that you can tie some, political agenda of getting more diversity and things like that to better cybersecurity, it's very doable. I also don't believe that we've got a million missing jobs though. It's a lot of, there's so many people that have been let go because they've been downsizing of cyber. I'm a little worried about that. I think a lot of times these jobs growth programs go for the big companies. The Northrop Grumman's, the Raytheons, the Anderson, that kind of stuff. And we don't think about the dentist office or the fact that these small businesses use MSPs. We have 30,000 MSPs across the country.
I'd be shocked if it was that low.
But every every time I go talk to an economic development group, I'm like, who's your MSPs? They're like, oh, we only have 2. I'm like, oh, you know what those 2 do? They do security they do IT for all your small business. That is like life, right? If you think about life sciences and insurance and finance, cyber is one of those things to make a business function. All of these economic development places I talk with, They have partnerships with law firms, with accounting firms, and business landlords. That kind of. They need to have that same partnership with folks who do IT because that is vital for that. So that's just some different ways. And again, a lot of this is local. Like if what I say here might not work in New York City, it might work in St. Louis, it might not work in rural upstate New York, it might work in the deserts of Arizona. So it's got to be a local thing where people are understanding how cyber works.
Do you think sort of the carrot versus stick analogy to cybersecurity, like regulation, CMMC is a stick? Now it might be mildly disguised here and there as a carrot, but it's at the end of the day, it's a stick. It's if you don't do this, you will be off contract. You will not be able to continue to work for us.
So on one hand, I can answer that question from how do we secure the DoD? And a vulnerable supply chain of vendors doesn't help the DoD. On the other hand, I tell a lot of my small businesses, like, you have to wait till you have the growth and scale to go after the DoD and engage with them, right? Because if you're going to go after them, you might have a lot of things that you have to do. We're talking CMMC. If you're doing DoD work, maybe you have to have a FSO, a facility security officer. That's a burden. I got to hire a whole employee now and dedicate them just to handle my secret. Like Tenable, when we started, the DoD forced us to have a secret facilities clearance, even though we had no secret material. It was just they wanted. And I hear crazy things like this from CMMC, like you need to have like all your data is, what was it, CUI?
Yep.
And like, oh, even my payroll data that I share with my paychecks, I got to get them now. And it's just not the right way to do that. But I kind of say, look, if you're a DoD vendor, you have to do this, right? There's no debate about it. We can complain about this or that. Not unlike PCI, right? If you want to do payment credit cards, you kind of have to do this kind of stuff. So, it is what it is. I don't want to be flippant about it, but I do think we don't have enough cybersecurity investment in small business. It has to be.
And do you see, like, in some of your investments, are there people trying to make headway into the small business sector or not? Because it feels like a lot of times when we talk cybersecurity startups, I see so many, they're all swinging for the grand slam. Everyone wants the $1 billion sort of IPO. They're all trying to say, like, I'm in every house. And
this is funny because when you read the National Cybersecurity Strategy, they say we want to shift the balance to vendors, right? But they don't actually just say, hey, look, if you're a Microsoft O365 shop, just buy every other Microsoft's cybersecurity product. But in actuality, if we did that, we would be a lot better off. Now we can always say that, oh, this particular vendor is better than Microsoft's phishing or their EDR, whatever. But the direct investment we have there is this MSSP called BMO. Now, BMO manages, if you were doing 100% Microsoft shop, their endpoint defender, the phishing, the threat, the authentication, the behavior, you're still dealing with like 7 or 8 different consoles, whether you're logging into the cloud. BMO has a way to bring it all together and basically run a Microsoft shop. And then the cool thing, once you have that, it's easy to plug it into like a Vanta, a Drata that basically measures your compliance. Somebody happens to turn off 2FA, they can turn it back on, that sort of thing. So anyway, they recently got CMMC certified, and they're going to be up and running like in early 25 to be able to do this. But they're on their way because it's a long assessment, that sort of thing. I've been urging them to do this, even though they've done PCI, they've done CIS, they've done all these other frameworks. I'm like, CMMC is still such an opportunity because one, we do to secure the supply chain for the DoD. On the other hand, it shouldn't have to be super expensive. And the way you can go from an MSP to an MSSP and be compliant, I think it's really good. It's one of the reasons we invested in BMO.
Yeah, that's a lot of what we do. So I'm glad to hear that someone with chops to analyze the market and all that also sees the opportunity. It means I'm doing something right, I think.
Absolutely.
Well, it's been fantastic. I feel like we could keep going. We could dig into so many different topics. We kind of scratched the surface of many. The running tradition here is the topics we cover. We're often talking about societal challenges, problems, national security, conflict, war, all that sort of stuff. It can have a pessimistic sort of trend to it, but so far we're batting at 1,000, where the person I sit across from is an optimist. And I think maybe that comes with the territory of being someone in this space who's going to be a leader in the space and build influence and things in the space, still has to see hope and reason to stay involved. And I always like to bring things back to personal sort of investment into why you're in this space and in particular what keeps you optimistic. So the tradition is I want to hear what keeps you optimistic against this backdrop of what could be scary, pessimistic, bad things that go on.
Yeah. So I still believe in the Star Trek kind of universe where everything is virtually free, right? I mean, education's free, food's free. We're not really motivated by value because it's there. So what you can focus on in that universe is personal development. And I get a lot of personal development out of working with so many great people and meeting so many people. But then I'm hoping that they get better from interacting with me and my peers and folks who are in our industry. It's all about personal improvement.
Well, Ron, it's been a pleasure. I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate your work. Super cool story, a lot of success. But like you said when we first talked about at the beginning there, seems like you're just getting started.
A lot of more work to do.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of The Watchers. For more great content, be sure to like, subscribe, and check out our channel. We'll see you on the next one.